Dun, 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 dun. Aloha Cafe Radio.
Welcome to today's deep dive. You know, usually when you make a major life decision, there is this expected standard of total due diligence,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. Like buying a car or, I don't know, picking a new neighborhood to live in.
Exactly. You run the numbers, you check the safety ratings, you read the reviews, and you look at the crime statistics.
You basically gather all the empirical data.
Yeah, you point to this meticulously organized spreadsheet and you say, okay, there it is. That is why I am making this choice.
Right, because it's risk management. It's calculated, it's measurable, and honestly, it's highly comforting.
It really is. We crave that level of verification.
We do. Human beings are, well, fundamentally wired to categorize and confirm the world around us before we commit.
Right, before we commit our time or our finances or our emotional energy.
Yeah, it's basically an evolutionary survival tactic, but translated into modern consumer behavior.
But, and this is where today's topic really gets interesting, step into the realm of personal belief and spirituality, and that spreadsheet just breaks.
It completely shatters.
Yeah, you are suddenly looking at a landscape that does not come with, like, a verified POTUS badge or a 5-star rating system.
Right, which makes us very uncomfortable.
Extremely uncomfortable. So today's deep dive explores that really uncomfortable line between rigorous fact-checking and true faith.
And we have some fascinating source material for this.
We do. We are analyzing a message delivered by Pastor Yasushi Nomoto at Kahului Union Church. It's titled, Do You Think You Believe?
Which is such a provocative title.
It is, right. It's rooted in the biblical text of John chapter 20, verses 24 through 31.
And what's great about this source is how the pastor uses this ancient text to highlight a psychological dynamic
Yeah.
about how humans process trust.
Yeah, a dynamic that is entirely relevant to you, the listener, regardless of your personal background.
Exactly.
And the way he frames this concept, it starts with something incredibly mundane, living in Maui and doing a lot of online shopping.
Which I love because living on an island limits your local retail options, right?
Yeah, you can't just run to the big box store for everything.
Right. Which forces this heavy reliance on the digital verification process.
You are trusting algorithms and, highly edited promotional videos and strangers' reviews just to make your decisions.
It's the ultimate fact-checking exercise.
So he tells this story about trying to buy a smartphone holder for his car dashboard.
Okay, I think we've all been there.
Right. He saw the expensive premium brand, but then the consumer instinct kicked in.
Naturally. You want to find the deal.
Exactly. He hunted around and found a cheaper knockoff that made all the exact same promises.
Of course it did.
The listing claimed that the mount could stick firmly to absolutely any surface, the dashboard, the windshield, even a textured console.
He verified all this.
So yeah, he read the claims, he verified the price difference, and made the calculated choice to buy the cheaper option, thinking, I just gamed the system.
The underlying psychology there is so common. It's the desire for the premium result without the premium commitment.
Yeah, we hunt for the specific data points that justify the easier or cheaper route.
So what happened when it arrived?
Well, the punchline was immediate. The suction cup only worked on perfectly smooth, perfectly flat surfaces.
Oh no.
Yeah, it was completely useless for a textured car dashboard.
That's classic.
The pastor actually noted that he just stood there with a wry smile, realizing that his rigorous verification process had completely failed him in the real world.
He got exactly what he paid for.
He really did. But that consumer disappointment, it serves as this perfect entry point for the text's central thesis.
Right, because modern culture conditions you to constantly verify everything before making a commitment.
So the text asks this profound question. Does this consumer mindset, this demand for absolute measurable verification, actually work when applied to faith and relationships?
It's a huge question, because it's one thing to want a verified phone mount, but this compulsion, it scales up to almost every aspect of our lives.
Especially our health and safety. Okay, let's unpack this part from the source because it's hilarious, but so true. It brings up the analogy of American television commercials for prescription medications.
Oh, wow, yes. The visual is always someone like running through a field of flowers or enjoying a beautiful sunset.
Right. Well, this very calm, soothing voice just casually reads off a legally mandated list of horrifying potential side effects.
It's such a bizarre contrast. The mechanism at play in those commercials is basically information overload disguised as transparency.
Right. We desperately want the cure that the medicine offers.
But the sheer volume of cautionary data triggers this paralysis of choice.
By the time the narrator finishes listing the risks of, internal bleeding or dizziness, you're left calculating whether the original headache was really that bad.
Exactly. The abundance of facts, rather than building confidence, often generates a deep-seated anxiety.
But wait, I have to push back here a little because isn't it dangerous not to verify?
What do you mean?
Well, if we don't fact-check our beliefs or the claims made by authority figures, don't we just open ourselves up to being manipulated by bad actors?
That is a very fair point. Because I read this and immediately wondered, how does the message differentiate between exercising genuine faith and just being willfully gullible? If I hire someone to watch my house, I am going to run a background check.
Right, you'd probably even set up a security camera.
Exactly.
Well, the text actually anticipates that exact defense. It carefully validates the absolute necessity of the verification mindset in the secular physical world.
Okay, so it's not saying all fact-checking is bad.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Our aviation safety protocols, structural engineering, the medical fields, they are entirely dependent on rigorous skeptical fact-checking.
Right. Society relies on it to function without collapsing.
Exactly. The critical shift the sermon highlights is not that verification is inherently bad. It's about what happens to the cognitive mechanics of trust when that rigid consumer-level demand for proof is mapped onto a relationship with the divine.
So if we are just gathering info until we are satisfied enough to say, okay, I believe, are we actually exercising faith or just approving a background check?
That is exactly the distinction. Think about it in terms of testing a bridge.
Okay, a bridge.
If you want to be 100% mathematically certain a bridge can hold a massive amount of weight, you might drive a fleet of heavy military tanks over it.
That would definitely test it.
Right. You would technically prove the bridge can hold the weight, but the extreme stress of the test likely caused microscopic structural damage to the concrete and steel.
Oh, wow. So the act of demanding absolute proof actually degrades the integrity of the thing you are testing.
Precisely. When you demand absolute proof before offering trust in a relationship, the act of demanding that proof fractures the relationship itself.
Because you are no longer trusting the person, you are trusting the surveillance camera.
Right. If believing is simply the mathematical result of confirming all the data, it ceases to be faith entirely. It is just a calculation.
You have not stepped into the unknown. You have just eliminated the unknown until you feel personally secure. But if this demand for control is so detrimental to experiencing true faith, where does this burning desire to verify divine things come from?
Well, the source actually traces this back to a very specific theological root in the book of Genesis.
The Garden of Eden story.
Yes. The narrative takes us to Genesis chapter 3. The serpent approaches Eve, and the very first dialogue recorded is a question.
Did God really say?
Exactly. And what's fascinating here is that the text frames this not as a blatant denial of divine authority, but as a subtle invitation to audit the divine.
To audit the divine, that is a powerful way to put it. It is the introduction of an entirely new cognitive framework.
Right. It is the moment the human mind is offered the option of self-preservation over innate trust.
The question implies that God's word might not be enough on its own, that humans need to independently verify the rules before following them.
And the psychological shift there is monumental. The sermon suggests this was the exact moment doubt became intertwined with human nature.
Trust was broken because the default settings shifted.
Yes, from relational reliance to independent verification. From that moment forward, humanity inherited this compulsion to confirm divine instruction, to be convinced strictly on our own terms before we offer our allegiance.
Which brings up the danger of the illusion of belief.
Right.
Because you might feel empowered by the verify first, then believe mindset. It feels rational, right? It feels intelligent.
Oh, absolutely. It feels safe.
But if you only believe God's word after you've thoroughly confirmed it on your own terms, you aren't actually trusting a higher power. You are only believing within the limits of what you find acceptable.
Which means you are strictly trusting your own judgment. You have made yourself the ultimate arbiter of truth.
And the inevitable result of making yourself the ultimate arbiter is that you shrink your reality to fit only what you can comprehend.
Exactly. This creates a massive distance between the human experience and the divine. You actively trick yourself into thinking you are trusting God, when in reality you are just managing your personal comfort zone.
Yeah, if a divine concept does not fit neatly onto the perfectly flat, smooth dashboard of your understanding, you discard it just like the cheap phone mount.
That is the perfect callback to the hook.
So, having established this danger of relying solely on our own judgment, the text provides a fascinating case study.
Right, the ultimate historical example of this mindset.
The biblical figure of Thomas. Historically, he is branded as Doubting Thomas.
He's often painted as a villain, or at least a special case of faithlessness.
But the sermon radically reframes him, doesn't it?
It really does. It challenges the listener to see Thomas not as this anomaly, but as someone who is just like us. An incredibly relatable proxy for the modern listener.
To understand that, we have to look at the situational context. It's 8 days after the resurrection.
Right, and all the other disciples have already encountered the risen Jesus.
They are buzzing with excitement. They are experiencing this overwhelming collective euphoria, telling anyone who will listen, the Lord is alive.
And Thomas is sitting in the middle of the celebration, having seen absolutely nothing.
The emotional subtext the pastor draws out here is so heavy. Thomas is probably feeling left out, confused, and incredibly lonely.
He's watching his closest friends celebrate the most monumental event in human history, and he's entirely on the outside.
He is dealing with grief, and it is entirely plausible he was wondering why Jesus didn't appear to him, questioning his own works to the group.
So out of that complex emotional trauma, Thomas builds a wall. He makes his famous declaration.
Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were, I will not believe.
Right. And the sermon argues this was not a cold, malicious rejection of the divine. It was a stubborn psychological defense mechanism.
He was guarding his heart from further disappointment. He desperately wanted the news to be true, but his trauma required a background check before he would allow himself to hope again.
He was stating his terms. I will believe, but only in a way that satisfies my own sensory criteria.
But the text highlights the danger of elevating our sensory experience above everything else.
It does this by drawing a sharp contrast between Thomas's basis of belief and Peter's.
Oh, right, the story with the fishing nets.
Yes. In a separate biblical account, Jesus instructs Peter, who is a professional fisherman, to lower his nets into the water.
At a time when the conditions were completely wrong for catching fish.
Exactly. Peter's expert knowledge told him it was a futile effort. He had zero empirical data supporting the decision.
He didn't check the water temperature, and his past experience told him there were no fish there.
Yet Peter's response was simply, because you say so, I will let down the nets.
Wow.
Right. Peter's action was rooted entirely in relational trust. He prioritized the word of the divine over his own expertise.
Whereas Thomas chose his own senses over the unified testimony of his peers and over the promises he had previously been taught.
The text uses this contrast to define the essence of what it means to just think we believe. It looks like an earnest, intellectual quest for truth, but it is fundamentally a refusal to yield control.
Which brings us to a really surprising twist in the narrative. How does the divine respond to our stubborn demands for proof?
Right, because Thomas crosses his arms, demands physical, sensory proof, and dictates his specific conditions.
A logical assumption would be that Jesus would reprimand him for his lack of faith.
Or simply dismiss him for demanding to audit a miracle.
Instead, Jesus steps directly into the room and into the skepticism.
He doesn't scold Thomas.
No, he doesn't tell him to try harder or shame him for needing proof. The very first thing Jesus offers is a greeting of peace. Shalom.
He meets Thomas exactly where he is, in the height of his stubbornness. It is a profound demonstration of grace bypassing behavioral expectations.
The sermon emphasizes that Jesus was fully aware of Thomas's inner struggles, the spoken ultimatums, the defense mechanisms.
But rather than demanding Thomas clean up his theology or adopt a better attitude before approaching, Jesus initiates the proximity.
He physically offers his hands and invites Thomas to run the verification test he demanded. He provides the requested proof, but does so by coming near.
And look at Thomas's ultimate reaction. It's a complete dropping of his defenses. He simply says, "My Lord and my God."
Which raises a critical question about the mechanics of what actually happened in that room. Did Thomas suddenly understand the physics of the resurrection?
Right. Did his brain suddenly compute the biological impossibility of a man returning from the dead?
Exactly. What changed?
The text argues that the transformation had nothing to do with scientific comprehension. Thomas did not suddenly acquire a flawless understanding of the mechanics of the cross.
What shifted was his internal posture.
Yes. And this is where the sermon beautifully redefines the concept of biblical surrender.
Because the word surrender carries a lot of modern baggage, doesn't it?
Oh, definitely. It usually evokes images of losing, of humiliation, or waving a white flag after a military defeat.
It feels like a forced loss of autonomy, like losing and obeying.
Right. We equate surrender with begrudgingly obeying a conqueror because we have run out of options. But the psychological framework of biblical surrender presented here is radically different.
It's not losing and obeying. True surrender is the active, willing choice to let go and entrust everything to the Lord.
It is a deeply relational exchange rather than a transactional defeat.
Think about the difference between thrashing in deep water to stay afloat versus simply floating.
Oh, that's a great image.
Thrashing is the exhausting demand for control, right? Floating is the decision to surrender to the water. Thomas did not finally understand the physics of the water. He just finally let go of his intense, fear-driven need to control his environment.
And releasing that need for absolute certainty frees up a massive amount of emotional bandwidth.
Thomas began by declaring he would not believe unless he saw the physical evidence. Yet his final confession was not a statement of scientific confirmation.
It was a statement of profound relational trust. The verification test became irrelevant the moment the relationship was restored. He let go of his conditions.
So to bring this back to you, the listener, the sermon leaves its audience with a psychological mirror, and it is a reflection worth examining in your own life.
What are you currently holding on to today? Where are you operating like Thomas?
Are you waiting until you understand absolutely every variable to take a step?
It requires an honest inventory of your cognitive habits. Are you delaying action in your life, your relationships, or your personal beliefs? Because you need that spreadsheet to be perfect.
Do you have hidden terms and conditions operating in the background of your mind? Like, I'll obey up to this point, but no further.
Or I will believe if this specific thing happens to prove it to me.
Or even the classic defense mechanism. I have to fix this massive problem all by myself because I cannot trust anyone else to do it correctly.
The text offers a gentle invitation to take those desires for control, to stop trying to fix everything yourself and place them into his hands.
It's a challenge to step out of that self-protective consumer mindset and step into a space of actual vulnerability and trust.
Which is not easy.
Not at all. But as we conclude this deep dive, consider the analogy we started with. The cheap phone mount that only functioned perfectly on a completely smooth, entirely flat, predictable surface.
A surface that is practically non-existent in the reality of daily driving.
Exactly. So here's a final thought to mull over as you go about your week. If our faith only ever exists perfectly within the strict boundaries of what we can personally verify and control, are we truly experiencing a relationship built on trust, or are we just managing our own comfort zones?
Are we demanding that the divine only operate on the perfectly flat surfaces of our life?
Or are we willing to release our grip when the road gets textured, complex, and unpredictable?
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep examining the evidence, but don't be afraid to let go of the spreadsheet. We will see you next time.